Well, yeah, thanks Geneva and Michael for joining us this evening. Really appreciate it. Um, Geneva and Michael are both from Denver Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, and they're going to be talking to us about the Community Transportation Network's Northwest bike proposals specific to the Sunnyside neighborhood. So I'll turn it over to you two.
Right, thank you. And because we're such a small group, I think we can probably be a little more informal than we typically are. I will share my screen, but you guys just feel free to interrupt me if you have questions. And because I can't always see everyone's, like if you have a hand raised or anything like that, really go ahead and like interrupt me. So let me pull up the right thing. All right, so let me go to presentation. Okay, do you all see presentation mode or normal screen?
Looks like presentation mode to me.
Yeah, it looks full screen with smaller folks.
Yeah, full screen. Yeah.
Okay, let me try this one more time. Different way.
No, the other one was right.
It looked correct. I'm sorry if I answered incorrectly. It looked correct the first time.
Yes.
That's okay.
That looks right.
Full screen.
Looks right. Great. Okay. Wonderful. So hi, everyone. My name is Geneva Houghton. And then here this evening, we have Michael Koslow, who is my design counterpart, as well as Jason Freitas on the consulting side. So we are talking about community transportation networks. And ultimately, these are multimodal plans, but we have a ton of bike projects. And this is what the bike network in Northwest Denver is going to look like by the end of 2023. And what the bike network looks like today is a lot less than this. And so we're really excited about really building out a network for people to get around. And as we are working through all of this, our goals are always to be creating a safe city, part of Vision Zero of eliminating all serious injuries and fatalities across the city by 2023. We are working to prioritize multimodal projects. We want to rapidly deliver high comfort bikeways, provide more travel options for people to get around, and so that we can better fit all the people who are moving to Denver and who deserve good ways of getting around the city. And we ultimately want to move more people. And so tonight I am going to just be walking through a couple of the corridors. For those who were at the North SUNY meeting earlier this week, a little bit of this is going to be repetitive, as well as if you were at the April 7th meeting. But we do have a few new things to share. So first, we want to talk about West 46th. So this corridor, we have a bunch of different facilities going in. So starting at Tennyson, it's a bike lane, then it becomes a buffered bike lane, switching to a bike lane again. We have another very short segment of a buffered bike lane just east of Pecos, and a block of a neighborhood bikeway turns to Lipan, it's a bike lane, and then it's a neighborhood bikeway for the very last few blocks. So when we're talking about 46th Avenue, the other complication for this corridor is that it's actually in two different segments. And the very first phase is between Federal and Lipan, and that is going in really soon, like the next couple of weeks. So we're excited about that. That was the portion that was resurfaced I think last August. We missed the construction window to really put down the bike lane, and so now we're able to do that. Now the other pieces of the corridor between Tennyson and Federal, and then Lipan down to 44th, those we have at 60%, and that's what we shared through the Conveo tool. And for those who aren't familiar with that, that's where after the April 7th meeting, every single 60% design that we have for Northwest Denver was online, and folks could go in, add comments, questions, and we have exported all of that. We closed that last Monday. So what you're gonna see tonight is just at a really high level, what we've heard. The team we're still digging into those comments, and we're going to continue to evaluate what we can address and some things we just can't. So for the segments that we had on Conveo, we heard a lot about the crossing at Federal, which isn't terribly surprising. Folks really do want better signal timing and detection. We heard about some visibility concerns generally, and then along with PAN, some concerns and just making sure that if there will be parking removal, that the parking removal is on the business side of the street where the larger kind of utilitarian, the word I'm looking for is out of my grasp at the moment, but not on the DHA side. So that's at a really high level, kind of what we heard. And this is just for what is in the Sunnyside neighbors. And then for SUNY, this is a different install mechanism in that SUNY Street north of I-70 is getting resurfaced. We think in June, it might edge into July. And so because of that, we have an opportunity to actually put in what was identified over 10 years ago in the citywide bike plan. And we've made some modifications to that. So at the very northern edge between 50th and 52nd, this will be a neighborhood bikeway. From 50th down to 46th, we have a little bit of extra space just because of how the street is laid out. And so we're going to use that extra space by narrowing the travel lanes to add a buffer. Some of you may have participated in a survey that we had open recently. And between that and other things that we've heard across the city and in this neighborhood through stakeholder meetings and our input map last spring, we've had about 90 comments and 87% of them are safety related, whether that's about speeding or crossing tough intersections. And really specific, folks identified that 51st and SUNY is a tough place to cross, as well as 52nd and 50th under I-70 and particularly at the signal, and then 46 as well. So the concept design that we have and that we're moving forward with is really intended to address these challenging crossings and to make SUNY overall a more connected and multimodal street, because we know of how important it is in the network to connect 46th to 50th and then up to 52nd. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this because I do think a number of you were at the meeting earlier, but we can always come back. So ultimately, the volumes and the speeds are right in alignment with a buffered bike lane. And what that's going to look like, you can kind of see at the top of the screen. That's our typical cross section with a bike lane, a buffer, and the travel lane. There will be parking removal proposed through this design between 46th and 50th in order to fit everything. Across 48th, we have some conflict markings. Under I-70, it's kind of a no man's land today. It's really wide and without necessarily a lot of delineation. So we'll be adding in the bike lanes and dedicated turn lanes. And then that buffered bike lane cross section continues south of I-70. And then in the northern part of the corridor between 50th and 52nd, here we have fewer cars per day and the speeds are just as high, if not higher, particularly in the northbound direction. And so for this, what we're seeing is that with having a shared condition and creating a neighborhood bikeway, we really do need additional deflection measures to make sure that those speeds are safe. So how we're proposing to do that is by adding curb extensions and median crossings at 52nd, and that's going to help shorten that crossing. There will also, just for you all to know, there will be a sidewalk that's going in at the very northern side of the park later this summer. Not part of our project, but good for everyone to know. And then we will be adding a chicane between 52nd and 51st. This is a newer treatment in Denver, and what it does is it calms traffic, mostly by kind of forcing this gentle turn in the street. So it's a newer treatment. We're excited about using it. We think it's especially going to help because of the speeds that we're seeing in that segment. And then very similar to at 52nd, at 51st, we're adding some curb extensions and median crossings to help really help people cross there. And all of those things will slow down cars as best we can and add some deflection. And hopefully that's not only just improving things for people who are biking, but also improving pedestrian conditions. And then we have a pinch point. And what this is it's adding some friction on the street and making it so that only one car can really traverse at a time, one car or bike. And what this does is it forces people to yield to each other, much like what you see on a very parked out, narrow street. And a pinch point also provides some of that traffic calming. So that's all I'm going to share tonight for SUNY. And this is the corridor that, because it is a paving corridor, we are moving forward with, and install is anticipated for this summer. I'm not sure exactly when. A lot of that is dependent on weather and when our crews can go out there. So we're excited about that. And of course, let us know if you have questions. For 41st, this is a full neighborhood bikeway corridor from Perry. It goes straight over, and then we kind of jog down to 40th at Navajo. And this corridor is interesting because it crosses tons and tons of schools. It also, not surprisingly, is signalized at Federal, and it's signalized, excuse me, it's not signalized at other places, but it does provide kind of this continuous east-west connection. And particularly, it's providing something that will, if folks want to bike east-west and they don't want to go as far south as 35th or as far north as 46th, it provides that intermediary connection. So across the whole corridor from Perry to Inca, there are 7 traffic circles, 15 intersections with curb extensions to provide additional pedestrian benefits. We are adding bike detection at Federal, pedestrian refuge islands at Perry and 41st, and also at Pecos. And what has changed in the 60% designs, and what you all had an opportunity to see last month, is that we did add additional corners or intersections with curb extensions, because we knew that we wanted to really make sure that we were limiting speeds as much as we could. We did add additional traffic circles, and then we removed the speed cushions that were in the concept design because of working through a pilot program across the city. And the comments that we heard on 41st were generally very supportive. We had some questions about impacts to the nearby school operations. And then kind of in the Sunnyside area, I would say that we had quite a few comments at Navajo itself, and kind of how does this interact with Trevista. And you can also see at La Pan, we had quite a few comments. So our team is still digging into these, but that, for you to know, that's kind of where they all fell. And I do think it's kind of interesting that we had very, very, very few comments between Pecos and Alcott. I mean, it's only 1 or 2. And Clay Street is another neighborhood bikeway corridor from 32nd to 46th. And this, very similar to 41st, has traffic circles and curb extensions. We're adding some pedestrian refuge islands. And we are also adding some diversion elements because the volumes on Clay are too high for a neighborhood bikeway. And so in order to kind of keep that character, the diversion is needed. In 1 second. So similar to what I just showed you on SUNY Street, we also are piloting 2 new treatments. As I mentioned, one is the pinch point, and that will be between 41st and 42nd. And the second is a chicane between 42nd and 43rd. And so these 2 treatments together are going to provide more of that mid-block speed reduction, which is really important, particularly on these long north-south blocks that are typically about 600, 660 feet. And that's long enough that a car can really pick up speed. And so only focusing at the intersection isn't necessarily enough. And sorry, those slides, I'm sorry. Those are my draft slides. And at Clay, our comments in your neck of the woods, we did have quite a few about the crossing at 38th. And then some questions about the chicane and the pinch point, and then quite a lot around 44th. And at 44th, we are proposing curb extensions. We've heard from various neighbors on that. And then you can see that it's really that block or 2 blocks between 43rd and 45th that we have a lot of comments. So as I said, our team is still digging into these, and we'll be we'll be seeing kind of what we can incorporate into our final designs. And then the last corridor that I want to update you all on is Tejon Street. I'm sure you all are really familiar with kind of the progression of this. At a really high level, Denver Moves had identified Tejon as a protected bike lane. We had moved forward through a lot of outreach with a protected bike lane concept, and also heard a lot about the impacts to neighbors and small businesses with that because of the full parking removal. So what we're doing right now is just sort of pausing, reevaluating, and collecting additional data on Shoshone and Kivas. And we are going to continue to work with the public and with neighbors and business owners and stakeholders on really evaluating all of these alternatives and coming to one that we think works for everyone as best we can. So that additional data collection and outreach is ramping up. We expect for most of that to be happening this summer, probably into the fall as well. So we don't have a whole lot new to share about Tejon, but we know that it continues to be a corridor that a lot of folks are interested in. And we know that this particular connection, north-south in this part of the city, is really, really important. And just at a high level about our implementation. So West 46 is at one portion is going to be constructed early this summer. SUNY, we expect to go to construction at some point in the summer following repaving. And then I listed out those other corridors for Sunnyside of Clay, 41st, and the rest of 46th. And these are going to go into construction sometime between, we would say, late 2021 into 2022. And much of this is dependent on how quickly we can finalize designs, but also contractor availability, how these get constructed. There are tons and tons and tons of factors at play here. So we have to keep it really vague. And I would say at best, some of these are going to go in this fall. And if not, then they're going to edge into 2022. And before I stop sharing my screen so I can see all your faces, just a reminder of kind of how to stay engaged with the process, knowing that there are so many different projects that are going on. We try to keep our website updated, and you can get to it through the bit.ly there. We also have office hours with me and my colleague. You can email the Denver Moves at denvergov.org. And we try to get back to the folks within about a week, sometimes a little bit longer, but we definitely are checking the email inbox. And if email doesn't work for you, you can call the project hotline and someone from the project team will return your call. So with that, I have just talked at you for 15 minutes, and I would love to hear if you all have questions or comments, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Thanks, Geneva. Go ahead, Bill.
No, I was just going to say, I have to believe there's comments and questions, and I can't believe that Phil's not going to go first.
Well, I've got a lot of questions. I guess one of them, one thing I've been curious about with the 41st Avenue bikeway, I noticed that it jogs south by a block when it gets to Trevista, rather than continue east towards Waldshanky and the pedestrian bridge to Globeville. Is there any reason it can't go through? I'm going to mispronounce the name of the park, Ciancio Park, and continue its route?
Question. The idea of kind of cutting through the school complicates things by quite a lot. And our goal was really to provide on-street connections as best we could. So the original alignment went around the school, back up Lipan, and then continued on 41st. And we looked at that and we said, well, that introduces so many different turns for someone biking. And effectively getting someone to Inca, it's really clear what's happening, and you can see the bridge, you're on the trail already. So that's one of the reasons why we opted to straighten out that alignment and just continue folks on 40th rather than introducing more turns into that. Whether or not we were ever going to go through the school, that wasn't really on the table, or cutting through the park. It just wasn't really on the table, considering kind of all of the capital needs that would take to make feasible, unfortunately. Maybe Coslow has a different take on that one. Oh, and we actually, Kozla, we can't hear your audio. Is it happening again? Okay. All right. Yes. So I think he'll put it into the chat if he has something new. This also happened earlier this week.
Other questions?
Hi, I have a quick question. My name is Lauren. I'm a Sunnyside neighbor. Thanks to Phil for inviting me to this meeting and giving me a heads up. I just wanted to, well, one comment. I just wanted to say I was really excited to learn about some of the other pathways and bikeways that are being put together, especially on 41st. I think that will be a really huge value add to the neighborhood. I also just had a question about the Tejon project. So is Tejon off the table completely? And if not, I'm wondering how it interacts with the current bus routes that are on that street.
Good question. So Tejon is definitely not off the table. I think it's really safe to say that we are going through and we have to evaluate those other alignments and say, what are the pros and cons of those, and where do those work really well, and maybe what are those trade-offs? So not off the table, but not also a done deal. Hence the reason why we need to do some more analysis and community engagement. And I think we heard really strongly from business owners on that corridor particularly, and a lot of neighbors on the corridor. To your question about the bus interaction, so as the Tejon concept was developed, that we are able to maintain bus access and protected bike lanes by you effectively drop the bike lane vertical protection, and you have a mixing zone for a bus to be able to pull in. So there wasn't any like negative impact to the RTD service on Tejon with a bike lane introduced.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Just one other comment, which is, as a neighbor in this area who utilizes most of the businesses on Tejon, I would say that I appreciated their advocacy, and at the same time, I think it would be disingenuous to believe that the advocacy clearly represented the choice. So it never once was the advocacy focused on bike lanes. It was focused on, they're going to remove our parking, but without clarity of what was happening. So I, as a neighbor, made an assumption that the removal of parking would be due to like increase of traffic on the road, not necessarily because of a bike lane. And if the choice were given to me, I would choose a bike lane over the parking. So I think I encourage more engagement on it, because it's just the advocacy coming from those businesses was really singularly focused on the parking and never mentioned the bike lane.
Thanks.
Thanks for the comment, Lauren. That was not an audience plant, just so you know. No, I just want to say I'm glad that you guys are taking the Tejon Street north-south corridor seriously and taking time to get it right. Currently, I conspicuously put my helmet here because I did ride Tejon to get to work here in Lodo. I do every day. It's a critically important north-south corridor for bicyclists in Denver and Sunnyside in particular, just because we have so few safe options to get into downtown Denver, and that Highland pedestrian bridge is really, for that area of Denver, is one of the only safe ways to do that. And so we love Inca Street. We're really excited about Clay Street. There's about a mile and change between those two north-south corridors. So we're really excited to get something that's safe and efficient, and just a fun way to get into downtown. So thank you guys for taking the time to get that right. I'm a big proponent of Tejon. I respect the decision to evaluate the alternatives just for due diligence. But really excited to see what you guys come up with on that.
Thanks.
Geneva, I've got a little bit different question. I'm not familiar with chicanes or really in this context, pinch points, but I think they both look like interesting concepts. Can you comment on what the pros and cons are between those two strategies versus the old-fashioned speed bumps? Because their objective is the same, right?
Yes, for sure. So a couple of things, and I see Cosmo typing in the chat, so I'll see how well we can match up on this. One of the things that is that Denver still needs to do some work on is really to make sure that speed humps work for all of the people who are using our right of way. So that includes, we are not the only, Denver Department of Transportation Infrastructure owns the right of way, but there are others like stormwater and utilities, and we do run snow removal. And so we need to make sure that speed humps really do work in a number of different facets that don't necessarily, we just need to make sure that that's happening. And so I would say both the speed humps and chicanes and pinch points, like those three treatments, because they're new to Denver, we just need to make sure that we're doing it right and are evaluating everything appropriately. In terms of kind of specifically what are the trade-offs, one is a chicane and a pinch point. Because of the linearity of how much space they take, there tends to be more parking removal with a chicane or a pinch point than just with a single speed hump.
That's why I asked the question, is it looked pretty obvious that that was the case.
But there are other reasons, I would say, to use one and not the other. And that in some instances is both of them are creating soft diversion, where someone may say like, that street I have to cross 5 speed humps, or I have to go down a chicane and there's a pinch point that's kind of annoying. I'm going to take another route instead. And I think I'm interested to see kind of what does the data say between how much soft diversion we have between all of those treatments. And then I think we also can have more data to say this actually works in this way much better than this other thing, or in instances where there isn't any parking demand, this treatment is better because it creates more of a diversion, not just a speed reduction. So it's a good question, and I don't have a perfect answer.
But it seems as though there isn't, you mentioned the downside of the chicane and the pinch point, given the loss of parking, but it didn't sound like there was a directly offsetting downside to speed bumps, other than people hate them.
I would definitely say that just because they are new to Denver, that it's not a downside, but it's we need to make sure that we know what we're really doing with them, and that all of the ways that we're using our right of way are accommodated with speed humps as well.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I have one final question myself. Others might have other questions. To what extent is your team coordinating with the recent contract on scooters and parking for scooters? As a bicyclist, I kind of have a love-hate relationship with the scooters, but they're on the road and they make me more visible, so I do appreciate that. These bikeways in the Northwest, are they designed with scooters in mind, and is there any coordination on where those are going to be located?
Yeah, I would say the idea of kind of creating places for people who walk, bike, take scooters, those are pretty similar streets, right? Like a neighborhood bikeway can also serve as a place for someone on a scooter that's a safe place. So I wouldn't say that it was necessarily all of these were built because of the contract that was that has recently been signed and all of that's coming. But I think it's part of that idea of how do we build out a network that's safe and comfortable and connected for anyone who wants to maybe leave their car at home for a trip. For the bike parking and micromobility parking, that's one of those things. Like Kozlov and I have been out at field visits this week on corridors, and we're looking and saying, oh, that would be a really good spot for us to add a bike corral, or that would be a really good spot to add on-street parking. So as we are going and kind of finalizing designs and moving into construction, all of that feedback is something that I think we want to continue adding and giving to our bike parking team to make sure that we can build out places for people to park. And so if you all have particular businesses that you frequent and they don't have bike parking, you can request bike parking to be added. If you think of a particular intersection that needs a bike corral, let us know and we can pass that along to the right people. So these things all interact, and we want to make sure that as we're building out a bike network, that we're not forgetting how people are parking in it or scooters are parking for it. So it's kind of all of it's together. I wouldn't say that we're super tightly coordinated because they're really different, but we're thinking about how all of these pieces are fitting together.
We've got several more minutes on the agenda, so if anybody has questions and concerns, fire away.
I do have a question, if I could jump in.
Go ahead.
Hi, hi, Geneva. I'm Jamie. I'm a Sunnyside resident. This is kind of off the wall a little bit because I didn't see it on your plan, but was any consideration given to the walkway on Federal from Sunnyside neighborhood to Rocky Mountain Lake Park? Do you know what I'm talking about? It's 46th and it goes across Federal to the lake. Lots of traffic there, lots of bikes, lots of walking people. Do you know the area I'm bringing up? Okay.
We have been really focused on everything in the right of way. So sort of once you get off the curb and you're in the street, that's where we are most focused. But the 46th Avenue project is one that we've coordinated really closely with Parks because they are redoing and adding a bunch of sidewalks in Berkeley Lake Park. And so we wanted to make sure that where we're adding a median refuge and a crosswalk makes sense for where there will be a new sidewalk connection in the park itself. So that doesn't necessarily address that kind of gap between the park and Federal, but to answer your question, like, yes, we kind of coordinated with all of those things, but we weren't necessarily focused on the sidewalk condition.
Thank you.
We still have 5 minutes.
So I might have missed it. Sorry, this is Mike Cabell, and I was wondering what is the time frame on trying to do the study on alternatives to home?
Good question. We are planning for that to be a summer fall effort. And I'm keeping that vague on purpose. Summer fall. We definitely, the very first thing that we have to do for any kind of alternative study is to really collect the data, and data collection takes some time. And then we need a group there and then engage everyone. So the details on that are definitely yet to be worked out, but we are, as we're kind of finalizing some of the designs of like Clay and 46th and 41st, I think some of our team will then have the capacity to start focusing on those other corridors.
I just want Phil to be safe when he's riding his bike. So,
Me too.
Yeah, it's really tough to remove parking on a residential street that's got a lot of parking on it. I'm just curious, anecdotally, I've walked the alleys behind the homes on Tejon. Vast majority of them have off-street parking, 1, 2, or even 3 spots. Is that data something you guys use in kind of evaluating the pros and cons of moving forward with a protected bike lane?
Yeah, we tend to use street more than like an evaluation of how much capacity is there off street. That's not always the case, but Tejon is a good example of there being, particularly in low-high, just a really high parking demand at a Friday night and a Saturday day. And one of our challenges was in doing this, we were able to collect our typical counts for residential parking, which is at 5 a.m. But we know that Tejon is not necessarily a fully residential corridor. And in the time that we were collecting data, it was COVID and everything was shut down during most of the data collection. And so as I'm pretty sure that one of the pieces that we're going to be able to do and to do better moving forward is to collect more nuanced data that's more recent. Now that things are opening up, and the data collection in, say, in August of 2021 looks dramatically different than in August of 2020. So I would say, like, to your question of how are we looking at how much off-street capacity, a little bit, but really we're trying to look at how is the street being used, when is it being used, and the data that we have was, and this was older data from 2017, was really showing a high demand, not only on Tejon, but also on the side streets in low-high. So, complicated question.
And I was happy to hear that Tejon is not off the table yet. One thing I'm curious about that, I don't speak for all bicyclists. I know there's a lot of bicyclists that would drive a hard line on getting a protected bike lane on both sides. Is there any consideration of a compromise where parking's removed from half the street? You have the other half and you have maybe a buffered two-way bike lane. Is that a consideration?
It could be on the table of looking at keeping some sort of bikeway on Tejon that isn't protected, in which case only one side of parking would need to be removed just with the street width. What you're suggesting of having a two-way protected bike lane on paper makes total sense, right? Save some space, groovy. The complication is that it requires specific signals, and those signals are out of our scope. And so it would require full signalization changes at 38th and 32nd. And that therefore makes it really challenging, not only because of the signals, but also just in general, having a two-way protected bike lane introduces more complicated movements at the cross intersections.
That makes sense. That's helpful clarification.
So anybody that hasn't had a chance to ask a question that has one? Going once?
Hey, Scripty. So I get, I know I sent a link to Lauren. She was asking specifically about kind of the businesses and their concerns. And I did send her a link and I could send it to the group. But if you haven't already, there was a forum to listen to the business concerns about Tejon. And that was in October 2020. And the recording is out there. So, I mean, I live on Tejon. While I don't bike to work and such, but I see parking being used, and if I have I have a garage, but I can see there are other reasons. For instance, my next door neighbor's got construction going on and there's a dumpster. What happens when a house is being either renovated or rebuilt? Where is that dumpster going to go? In the alley and block off everybody's access in and out? They're going to put the dumpster around the corner and walk all the debris back and forth. I mean, so there's some of that concern, but I would encourage folks who are wondering what the businesses were saying to go listen to that recording, and I'll put the link in the chat. And Geneva, on Tejon, the question I had when we spoke earlier was about the speed and volume and why something such as the Sharrows or a neighborhood bikeway can't stay, because I too love the north-south on Tejon and the connectivity to the Highland Bridge. And I'm speaking for myself, I might still use it even when it's not the designated bikeway, because it is really direct. But we were talking, you and Paige, about kind of the volume and speeds and the bus and how, and when you took the studies, and it was, during COVID, and I was questioning, well, is the new normal not the same? And you guys had indicated, which I would not have guessed, was in terms of the traffic, it had bounced back 80% already, since the beginning of the pandemic to now. So the thought of the number of cars, and so the volume of cars and the speed still makes it not even possible as a neighborhood bikeway because of those things. And no, COVID isn't, what we experienced at the beginning of COVID isn't necessarily the new normal either. If you want to share a little bit about on that, just for other folks to kind of get a a broader picture.
Yeah, so Trupti, you bring up quite a few good things. The first is we get that question all the time of like, well, what about construction on my street? What do we do? Like, how could we possibly not have this? How can this bike lane work? I need construction. And that answer is there is a process for that. And that is a revocable street permit. And there, if you are someone who needs that to happen, yes, thank you, Kozlo. See, same idea. So we can help folks with that. So the data that we collected on Tejon of the vehicular speeds and volumes, we were really lucky. We got it collected February 23rd to 26th of 2020. So like just eked it in before COVID hit. So the numbers that we have are good and we didn't have to do any calibration of that data. So just for you all to know, anything that we collected after COVID, we've had to calibrate and say, how has this changed because of COVID? We're going to make some professional guess estimates and really make sure that those numbers are as close to what we would probably see in a non-pandemic time. But on Tejon, that is not the case for speeds and volumes. Now, the speeds and volumes themselves are the highest I think it gets to is 5,500 roughly. For a neighborhood bikeway, anything over 2,000, we really have to divert cars away from. So thinking about Clay Street, for instance, the reason why we have to have diversion on Clay is because the volumes are at 3,300. So on Tejon, in order to actually, if we were to ever make it a neighborhood bikeway, which we wouldn't, but if we were, we would have to divert so many cars off of it, which then they would push it onto the local streets. It has bus traffic, which the buses couldn't go through. And it would have a pretty different impact on the businesses because if I would imagine businesses would feel pretty strongly if there were a diverter put in that would limit any north-south travel for a car in front of their business. So that's one of those reasons of like, in a perfect world, there wouldn't be any trade-offs, but the real trade-off is like a neighborhood bikeway just doesn't fit the context of Tejon. It really would need to be a striped bike facility, or to do a neighborhood bikeway, we would need to go to Shoshone or Kivas. So does that kind of elaborate on what you were talking about, Trupti?
Oh yes, I wanted everybody else to kind of hear some of the other things that we had talked about that are related to the challenges on Tejon. Thank you.
Yeah, no
Thanks.
problem.
Geneva, thank you very much. This has been a very well received presentation, and certainly Tejon's a little bit controversial, but as Philip said, glad to hear that that's still something of an open question. So maybe this fall we'll have you back and you can tell us a little bit about where it's going and answer some questions at that time as well.
Yes, we would be happy to. Thank you so much for having our team.
You're welcome.
All right.
So our next agenda topic is relative to the I-70 sound barrier. And I am really excited to have this topic, partially because I think it's of interest to many of us, but also because Jamie Runko, who is going to be talking on the subject, sought us out, sought SUNY out as an RNO for some help in the effort that she and some of her neighbors are putting forth in this regard. And I say this, and I bring this up as a preamble, because personally, I really think that's one of the most important things about our RNO, is that we are here to be of help, to be of service, and to empower residents that have things that they want to see happen in the neighborhood. So Jamie, thank you for reaching out. I'll turn this over to you. I think you've got the ability to show your screen and tell us what you've got going.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate you guys and the support that you've given me in this project, which is a little bit of a passion project for me. Let me see if I can share here. All right. Let me know what you guys see.
You are sharing your screen. You're in good shape.
Is it, okay, so just one screen, it's not the whole thing, right? Just making sure.
No, there's a title block with a photo partially behind it.
Perfect. So you guys see my view every day from my neighborhood. I moved to Sunnyside. I am just a Sunnyside resident trying to get this off the ground. I moved here in 2013. I absolutely love the neighborhood. I really just expected, honestly, when I moved here that this wall would not be a problem anymore. And it was in such disrepair that, of course, within a couple of years, they would replace it with something effective, right? 10 years later has not happened. So this is what our neighbors and myself look at pretty much day to day. So currently, CDOT's plans, they do have the plans to replace the wall. It is 4 miles. So yes, that's super extensive. That's a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of funding. So far, the only portion of it that's funded, I don't know if you guys can see that little yellow area, that is from Tennyson to
Lowell.
Oh, is it Lowell?
Yeah.
Thank you. So really, really small portion of it funded. They do have plans to complete the whole entire thing, but no timeline, no money thrown at it. I check with Julie George at CDOT frequently, and they really have no idea when that's going to happen. And so my plight and my motivation for kind of getting the neighbors together is really just to encourage our legislators to fund this project. It needs to be done. As you can see on my next slide, this is another example of what we see every day. The Chaffee Park neighbors see this, everyone in Sunnyside, and you know, it's dangerous. This is supposed to be a wall separating residents, kids, pets from I-70. Clearly, it's not effective when the walls are constantly falling down. CDOT's not good at repairing these things timely. We can make complaint after complaint after complaint, and still they sit like this for a long time. Also, they're not effective. This is supposed to be a sound barrier. How can a sound barrier work when the walls continuously fall down? In addition to falling down, this has happened several times. Cars actually come off of I-70 and come down onto South 48th Street, which is terrifying. People walk their dogs. I run on that street. I just think that the community needs something more effective in keeping us safe. So really my goal in getting all of this together, I've been pretty active on Nextdoor. We do have a Facebook group. I want to obviously get the support of you guys, get the support of Chaffee Park Neighborhood Organization, who I've been in touch with. They are very supportive of our outreach, potentially start a neighborhood petition, just advocating that we really fund this project fully. And then, you know, I'm open to any ideas that you guys may have. You know, I am not obviously a politician. I am just a resident. I don't know, you know, the best way to kind of go about getting this done, but I think that our community deserves better. And hopefully with us advocating for that, it'll happen sooner rather than later. And then just a little plug for our Facebook page on there at the bottom.
Can you put that Facebook page in the chat?
Yes, I can.
Jamie, had you said that you've reached out to some of the politicians that would be most important to us, and what kind of comments, suggestions, or help have you gotten from them?
So really the direction that I have and the direction that they've given me is really to organize with the neighborhood associations, such as you guys, such as Chaffee Park, get you guys involved if I can. Amanda Sandoval, super supportive of this project and really trying to work with CDOT to get this funded as well. She actually indicated that she lives in the neighborhood where they are replacing the wall. So she's getting the nice concrete barriers. And she was like, well, that's unfair. You know, that's by 2 parks and a golf course, right? So of course they're going to go there first where she lives. But she's very supportive, really pushing the project. Gina Volpe, I've talked to a bunch as well. I have not heard back from Governor Polis. A couple of other representatives have not responded either. So that's kind of where I'm thinking like a petition, getting some flyers out, really kind of getting the word out there that we're sick of looking at this and we need something safer, looks better, all the things.
Hey, Jamie, this is Trupti.
Hey.
Hi, how are you? Thank
Great.
you for, your passion and bringing this forward. I think, I want to say you might be the second person, at least in the last 3 years that I've been paying attention on Nextdoor, who kind of was, trying to do the same thing.
Yes.
I think you've probably gotten further. In terms of the financing through CDOT, or just financing in general, from talking to the various folks in the government, have you learned where exactly this funding comes from, whether it's general funding, capital improvements? Just curious whether there's something in there for, as part of kind of starting to put on pressure and heat, is paying attention to the appropriation and budgeting and stuff. So what have you learned in terms of where this money comes from?
Yeah, so one of the things that I did learn is that the only reason that the section from Lowell to Tennyson is being completed is because that is coming from a COVID funding source that CDOT received. That's literally the only project, the only reason the project is even off the ground. And then from what I'm hearing about the other funding sources is that they are depleted. That due to COVID, CDOT gets a lot of their money for reconstructing things like fences from gas. And because gas was so low last year, this is really not going to get funded. So I know gas was one big way, and I'm not sure about the others. I know there is a bill right now, Governor Polis. I don't know if you guys saw the recent article, but there's a transportation bill supposed to be adding 5.2 billion to transportation over the next 10 years. So it's my hope that if that is signed into law, that CDOT will be able to utilize some of that money to put that towards projects like this. But I can find out more about that. I will ask Julie. I pretty much email her every couple of days. So
Is this Gonzalez?
No, Julie George at CDOT.
Oh, got it. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Yeah, no. And also, along with the financing and all of the funds being depleted, and again, don't quote me because I'm not following the money as close, but I thought because of all the serious cutbacks, they ended up with a surplus now that they're, thinking about what to do with. So I I think, they could say that, yes, it's only from gas money, and that's down because of the amount of travel and there is nothing else. But, I guess keep fighting the good fight because, I think there might be more money than they're talking about because they made such big cuts that they, more than they needed to.
No, I think that's a really good point because one of the things that I noticed as well is they stopped picking up garbage along their right of way as well. And so you're probably totally right. That's a great avenue to look at.
Thank you very much.
Jamie, who can we contact at CDOT? Should we also write emails to Julie?
Yes, I would love that if you guys wrote emails to Julie. Let me put her her information in the chat.
And I'm also curious, this is a little bit outside of Sunnyside's borders, but I've always really wanted CDOT to invest in a sound barrier on the north edge of Rocky Mountain Lake Park. It seems to me inappropriate for the level of noise in that park. It's supposed to be a sanctuary from the concrete jungle, and that path that takes you around Rocky Mountain Lake Park takes you within really a stone's throw of the highway. And so I'm hopeful that I don't know if we should coordinate with Berkeley, Regis United Neighbors organization, I don't know if they've been pushing for that.
Hey, I can add a little flavor there.
Sure.
I recently spoke with Jeffrey Stein. Their current president just stepped down, so they're kind of in the interim. They've actually had a little bit of turnover. But I recently talked to Jeffrey Stein, who's actually their ZAP committee chair. And he was kind of asking about this particular project as well. And what I would say is, maybe there is the opportunity to partner or kind of have a consolidated effort across those multiple RNOs is a way to support the work Jamie's trying to get done. So I think that's a possibility. My point is with Berkeley Regis. So Chaffee, Berkeley Regis, and Sunnyside, all three of us could be on the same page on this.
I love that. That's amazing.
Great.
Did you get any traction with the North Star?
Yeah, they're doing an article. It should be out this week.
Good.
Yeah. They came out and we did a I don't know. I don't know the name of it, but it was like a sound machine, like seeing how loud the walls are, and which
Decibel reader.
Thank you. Exactly. Yes. And it was significant, especially when the semis are coming down that hill with their Jake brakes. Extremely loud. So, but that should be coming out this week.
Actually, when I was talking to Jeff, he had an idea just related, and it was all about trying to bring more attention to something like this. Was, if you did a cleanup, like a park cleanup kind of in this area, just to get more eyes and visibility to what you're talking about. And, a lot of people who don't have to see this, it's like, out of sight, out of mind, or not thinking about it. But just as a way to bring more visibility was something he was kind of thinking about.
Absolutely. That's amazing. I've thought of this so many times, these like rogue, crazy projects, like lining up along the fence with shirts that say, "We live here." Like, look at us.
Right. Stuff like that.
Yes. Love it.
Anybody else have any thoughts or questions for Jamie?
Thank you, Jamie, for mobilizing on this. My wife and I live at Vallejo and Scott, so we can hear the highway pretty well. I'm sure you can hear it much better
Yes.
north of 46.
Yeah.
So it's past time, and glad you're taking the initiative on that. Looking forward to joining the group
Awesome.
on
Thank
Facebook.
you. Yeah. Thanks for the support.
Yeah, Jamie, and certainly as your efforts progress, we can have you on, this meeting additional times, 2, 3, 4 months from now, if you've got additional things to report, or especially if there's actions that you'd like us to take or that you'd like to seed throughout the neighborhood, please keep in touch and let us know how we can help. And I know that we'd like to be involved in helping you get a petition out. And I think the idea of coordinating with the other two RNOs is also an excellent idea.
Agreed. Yeah, I will be doing that. Yeah, and I will definitely keep you updated.
Yeah, the squeaky wheel is going to get the grease here, and I really think the more pressure we can get from our councilwoman as well as our state senator and representative in this area. I guess there might be multiple representatives, but if we can get more pressure from our elected officials on CDOT, then we're going to have a much better chance of getting some results.
Yep, I couldn't agree more.
Good. Jamie, thank you very much.
Thanks, you guys.
Good luck.
Thank you.
So our next agenda topic is the situation that's going on with Monkey Barrel. And I think Tripti was going to walk us through the most recent things that have been going on.
Yeah. So obviously, at last PCD, we had Jimmy come and we were talking about the changes that he wanted, and we had boiled that down to kind of 3 areas. And actually, Philip, do you want to make me co-host and I can share my screen?
I will do my best. I think you can share without being co-host.
Oh, okay. Oh, if that's the case, let me try to do that. No, it doesn't look like it. Hold on.
I'm liking the screen you have now.
You're an anchor what? I didn't
Oh,
know.
yeah, it is. All right, I might not be able to do that. I don't see that I'm able to share. At least I don't have it up. Hold on, let me see.
If you want, I can make you the host.
Try it. Okay, try. I just want to, it's odd. I'm just not able to do it.
You should be host now.
Okay. Yeah, it's a little different than I'm used to seeing, to be honest with you, which is odd. Let's try something. Hold on. And let me open this. Can you all see that?
Yep, now you've got it.
Yep, great. So, and I just didn't want to, I want everybody to be able to see as I read these questions. So we had these 3 questions and and that's why I was disappointed more people weren't on this call from the first PCD or last month's PCD who were probably interested in this. So we had the 3 questions that were being voted on. What we did was everyone who registered and attended last month's PCD, then there was a follow-up survey monkey with these 3 questions. And the 3 questions, and then we've got a vote taken, a total of 44 people voted. And then we broke that down between all and folks who live within the 3 blocks of Sunnyside, I'm sorry, of the business, what, excise and license would refer to as their designated area. And mostly because the designated area is the folks who are most impacted, but we looked at both aspects. And then Sunny as a board had a follow-up after the results of the survey came back, so that the board itself voted on these same questions, because this was informing our vote basically. So the 3 questions, the first one being recommend to Sunny board that Monkey Barrel's outdoor speakers can stay on until 10 versus a current limit of 9. As you can see that it is not in support, just slightly, at least on the total 44, and obviously the folks within the 3 blocks, it's a kind of a bigger difference with the number of people who are not in support. And we had 7 out of 10 of our board members, so that's a quorum for us. And you can see our vote there was also not in support, 5-2. That's the first question. The second question was recommend to Sunny board that when live events are being played indoors at Monkey Barrel, exterior openings can remain open until 10 p.m. versus the current 9 p.m. limit. Here, on the total 44, we've got more in support. On the designated area, still not in support. On the Sunny board vote, we voted 4-3 in support. And the third question we had was recommend to Sunny board that the Monkey Barrel's exterior openings can remain open at all times versus the current provision, which requires they shut no later than 9 p.m. Under no circumstances will the exterior openings remain open past 10 when a live event is occurring. And here again, there was on the overall 44, no, didn't pass. Again, on the designated area, didn't pass. And the board also, it failed 6-1. So that's the questions we had. That was the board vote. I shared this with Jimmy a couple of weeks ago, and basically he is now questioning the language of the questions. He's questioning the validity of the vote. And at this point, we have now entered into mediation for this purpose. So we've got a city mediator involved, and we are working with Jimmy's attorney right now to kind of come to a resolution on this, whether we're going to make the changes that based on this vote, and then change the language and amend it on the GNA, and then change the language that is on the face of his license regarding this one provision, which all 3 of these things kind of fall into one of the 3 or 4 provisions that are on his license. So at this point, we are in hold until there's a resolution on the mediation. With that, I'll open it up for questions.
Hey, Shruti, this is Mike. So I mean, I read the letter from the attorney a few times, and I saw the emails going back and forth. And what at this point they've asked to see the vote. So okay, you give them the vote and that's all there is. I don't know why there's a mediation. I mean, there's been no request from them other than saying he doesn't agree with the, you know, the way the vote was handled or something.
Well, to be honest with you, I'm really not going to go into kind of any of this detail because it's a, you know, it's an evolving story, and with his attorney involved and the mediation involved, we're just going to allow that to take its course. In fact, I was wondering whether we should even share anything because all of this is being questioned, and he suggested that go ahead and share the results of the vote as an update to the community because we owe the community an update, and that at this point it's in mediation, really no further comment on how that mediation is going to be handled because it's really in the mediator's hand and Jimmy and his attorney's hand. And, you know, as we are brought back in, I've shared the recording of the meeting. I've shared a lot of the emails that have gone back and forth, and because, you know, those are things that his attorney as well as our mediator wanted to see. So I'd say it's, you know, it's in the works right now, and
That's
I'm going to
fine.
wait for the mediator's
Okay.
advice on
Yeah.
next steps.
Okay, so next week, I think you're gone this weekend. So
Yeah.
maybe next week we can set a time where just you and I can talk.
Yeah,
'Cause I want to get up to speed. So just let me know when you're back and then we'll
Sure.
check.
yeah,
Okay.
sounds good. I thought I saw Brittany's hand up for sure, but I don't know. Somebody else is monitoring the
One-
chat questions.
One quick addendum to Trupti's comments is that just from a technical perspective, the reason this is mediations getting involved is because that's specifically what's called for in the GNA, is that any disputes between Sunny and Monkey Barrel should be settled through mediation. So just that's why those logistics are in place.
Thank you, Bill.
As Trupti said, Brittany, was your hand up?
Yeah, I thought I saw Brittany's hand up.
It was. I just had a quick question. I had sent an email to SUNY. My roommates were also on the call, and I asked about how they would be able to register for that vote. And I never heard back.
And I'm gonna, I think that must have been gone to James. But James was handling everything kind of PCD, call, registrations, vote. So I don't know, but we had indicated that everyone who was wanting the vote needed to register for that call. So I don't know if she didn't, and that was the case. However, I don't want to speak for James, but Brittany, if you want to send me that question, and if it went to me and I didn't respond, I apologize. Send that question to me.
You responded and you asked me to reach out to James. I just never
Okay.
heard back from James.
Okay, well, okay, so then James is actually on vacation. He's in Cancun. So I don't know what he did there in terms of included or not included, if you knew the email that it was coming to. So I don't want to speak for him, but that we'll follow up on that.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for bringing that to our attention, Brittany. Anybody else have comments or questions?
Hello, this is Keith Howard.
Hi, Keith.
Hello, Keith.
May I ask a question? May I make a comment about mediation in general? It tends to work to the disadvantage of the weaker party. The mediator gets paid if there is a resolution, and there's a sort of a dynamic there. I hope you probably are aware of it. I just wanted to make a reminder of this. The mediator will tend to lean on the weaker party, whichever that is. So be ready.
Thank you. Thank you, Keith. I will say we've with some of the complaint issues with neighborhood complaints against Monkey Barrel, we've gotten to know the mediator a little bit. I mean, we know who he is. We've had some conversations, but it's the first time I'm going through this on behalf of Sunny. So, any guidance and advice or, pitfalls I should be aware of, I'm open to learning and hearing of those. But thank you, Keith.
No, certainly. I will mute myself now.
So we're a couple minutes over, so I'll move on if
Okay.
nobody else has any comments, but I want to make sure that if anybody has any questions or comments, they get a chance.
And I'll put my email in the chat if anybody has a question afterwards as well.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
thanks, Trupti. So our final agenda topic is updates on the neighborhood planning initiative and the conservation overlay. I can knock the neighborhood planning initiative off pretty quickly for the reason that it's as quick as it is that the city has pushed it back a little bit further. Their website is now saying that things will get started this summer. I believe they are hoping in potentially in May, but more likely in June, to have an initial steering committee meeting. And I know that they are finalizing the steering committee and have been for the last week or two. So they really are on the cusp of getting things started, but unfortunately it has been drawn out quite a bit. Probably the most important comment I can make for this group is that I hope that all of you have gone on to the city's website, to the Near Northwest Plan initiative page and signed up for email updates. That is the best way for you to be in the loop as the process gets started. There had been a separate list on the Sunnyside website, but we have fed all those names into the city, and we are really trying to funnel people to the city rather than create our own list. So please, I hope everybody on this call is very interested in NPI. So please make sure that you're on that email list.
I just put the link to the city's NPI for Near Northwest. On that page, you'll be able to plug in your email to get onto their distribution list.
Great. Then secondarily, the conservation overlay is at a very exciting point. As I've told everybody at most of our meetings over the last 6 months or so, there's been a working group of 10 or 12 of us that have been meeting not quite monthly to really review the nitty-gritty of the overlay as it was originally sketched out. We have really at this point reached a conclusion and come down to 8 what we're calling heavy hitter elements that we think are most critical to the overlay. And the next stage is bringing those 8 heavy hitters out into the neighborhood, out into the community, and soliciting feedback on whether the overall neighborhood agrees with us as a working group that yes, these are the things that are important to incorporate into the overlay. So the first, well, it won't be one thing. There'll be a survey and a lot of signage and posters, yard signs. And I'm going to let Naomi comment specifically about the survey because she's put a lot of work not only into getting us to these 8 heavy hitters and sort of corralling the working group, but also putting what is a phenomenal survey together that I think is going to be really helpful, not only in getting the opinion of the neighborhood into the working group, but also I think it does a great job of really explaining each of the 8 different elements. So I think it's going to be a really effective strategy.
Thanks, Bill. Yeah, we're super excited to be at this point, and to finally bring kind of what we've spent a lot of time on out to the wider community. So I am going to be putting in our chat a link to basically the test version of the survey. And if any of you would be kind enough to go through it, I'm also going to put in a link to a Google Doc that we have that I think everyone should be able to access and edit for notes, feedback, comments, anything you have. Just to say you will be the first people that have had eyes on this aside from the working groups. So please keep feedback to how the survey is presented. Does it make sense? You know, we've been like this with this concept for the last year, and I think that it's really valuable to have the perspective of people who are seeing these things maybe for the first time, and as we're trying to bring this to a broader community, making sure that these concepts make sense, that it's being communicated well. So if you have feedback on images, if we need more graphics or something would help explain what we're talking about, or just general feedback, if you notice grammatical errors, literally anything, please put that into the Google Doc that I'll also put on there. Right now, we would just like feedback on that versus feedback on whether you agree or disagree with the actual concepts being presented. We're more looking for just, does it make sense? Do you feel like you understand what's going on? And then you can make a decision later. As you go through the survey, feel free to put in answers or not, but realize they will be dummy answers. We're gonna throw out all this data. This is just the test version. And then we should be launching it to the wider community over the next month. And we're going to be doing that a couple of different ways. So we're going to kindly ask everyone here to tell as many people as you possibly can about it. We're going to be doing flyers, actual like door hanger flyers to all the properties that this would affect, which is over 3,000. So it's a pretty big lift. And we're also going to be sending mailers to anyone whose property address, who owns property in the affected area, but lives elsewhere, because we want to make sure that even landlords or property owners that don't live in the neighborhood know what's being proposed to happen with their land. And like Bill said, yard signs, all sorts of things. And also hopefully using this as a touch point to promote the neighborhood planning initiative as well. So stay tuned for that. We'll have a lot more info probably at the next meeting. And please go through and give us your hard critique of the survey that I'm going to go put into the chat right now.
So I guess I'll open it up for any questions or comments on the neighborhood planning initiative or the overlay. You know, Naomi kind of touched on it. It's really, I think, advantageous that both of these things are going to be going parallel path. They really hopefully will feed into each other and have everybody very sensitized to the importance of planning in the Sunnyside neighborhood.
Oh, and I'll say I'll also put my email address as usual. Anyone can contact me if you have questions about this project in particular, or of course other planning, zoning, land use questions at all in Sunnyside.
Hey, it's Tripti. So I guess one thing is we haven't, I guess overlay hasn't been presented to the general public in a very long time. And I'm just wondering whether folks that are on here who are not already either involved or have been involved, would they really know where to start in terms of asking questions on the overlay? So I guess, Bill, the question is, when could we actually have kind of where we are so that, you know, folks kind of have something to kind of give feedback regarding, you know, because right now it's just kind of like, oh, okay, overlay, you know, what is it, you know, but when can we share something so that folks have something to actually look at, understand, and then ask questions?
Well, I guess the interpretation I would have for your question is that the best forum we have is this monthly meeting, and rather than just having a very brief update, which is what we've been doing for at least 6 months, if not closer to a year, I think I'll interpret it as an idea. It's probably good for us to put a full agenda topic on this meeting for next month. And I think that timing would actually be perfect with the survey really having been finalized and being ready to put the other materials out into the neighborhood. So if that's
Yeah,
If
I
that's what
think
you were
that's what we
suggesting.
need.
I'll
Yeah.
take that. I'll take that as a note to make that the lead item for the June meeting.
Yeah, I would second that. And I think that it would actually be so valuable to be able to do, because we're planning to hold kind of town halls, virtual ones, where, or maybe some sort of hybrid format eventually, but where,
CDC says we can get together now.
right, we're vaccinated. It's very exciting. So as we've done with the 2 other overlays that we worked on in District 1, we've held town halls where I and Sunny leadership and the working group, we will do a presentation with lots of graphics and explaining what is in the proposal to people. And then most of it is open for Q&A. So it's really meant to be a community platform for learning about what's being proposed and talking about it. It would be awesome to do that here first, like Bill was saying, maybe next month, because in addition to discussing and getting your all feedback on what's in it, you can also maybe help us refine it. You know, sometimes like with this survey, again, we've been so close to this information. You want to really make sure that when we bring it to people who have never been to a planning committee and don't know what zoning means, that when we actually have those town halls, that it's presented in an accessible and understandable way. So I think that would be a fantastic opportunity.
And Tripty, I think you make a good point. It's been so long since this was really put in front of everybody that I'm sure everybody, except for those of us on the working group, everybody needs to get reconnected with it.
And Naomi, as far as the survey and how long it'll be open, I'm assuming it'll be open for a while, but it would be helpful to have it, obviously after the next, after a presentation and maybe even a town hall, right? Before folks would maybe even be very knowledgeable or comfortable enough to provide input on a survey that is very specific to these items. So how long do you anticipate the survey being out and open?
Months.
Okay.
Yeah, months. We've even just for our accessory dwelling unit kind of survey rezonings, we've had them open for like maybe 3 months, honestly. And part of that is we're constantly looking and seeing how responses are coming in, and trying to get to that goal of having enough feedback from the community to make a statistically significant decision really on things.
Provide credibility.
Exactly, yeah.
Great.
So we'll keep it open, and we'll keep, if we have to do flyering again, if we have to go door to door, we have a bunch of tools in the toolbox that we can roll out as we kind of see how the feedback starts to come in from people.
So, and related to that, Bill, I think my suggestion would be that besides a meeting where we're doing this, but actually have those presentations on the website, share on, Facebook or Nextdoor, like start building the momentum and, energy around this, so people know that there's something called, then overlay, and then we've got a presentation, the meeting comes after, just to make sure we get as much participation and visibility to this work as possible, so that the huge effort and the lift you're talking about with the survey and the flyering isn't wasted, because nobody knows what's going on. More of that. So thank you very much.
Right. Lauren, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I had a question. Naomi, like I think maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago, the city did like a slot homes commission. And I was wondering if you're aware of that and like how I don't actually know what happened to the recommendations that committee made, but some of them seem somewhat similar or at least connected to this conversation with regard to just those larger structures, making them feel more like integrated with the neighborhood, having front porches, and so I was just wondering if you guys have looked at that and how that matches this, and whatever, if you know whatever happened with those recommendations.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I know former Councilman Espinoza was really involved in that, and it was a big conversation. Those recommendations were passed, and actually the zoning code was changed based on it. Unfortunately, they provided a grace period for some projects that had already been submitted and permitted. So there have over the past years been a few trickling in that were still built under the old rules. But in general, most of the construction we've seen like in the last year or two has that slot home amendments prevented the sort of sideways turned form where there's just a garage drive aisle down the middle. And so we're not going to see anything more like that. I do think that you bring up a really good point. I haven't gone back and kind of looked at especially some of the earlier recommendations that task force came up with, because I know over time it got simplified and it got pared down. But I think probably some of the things that they came up with as suggestions to help the forms look better are similar to sort of what we're doing now. So maybe some things that kind of got lost on the cutting room floor there, like requiring porches, we're requiring bigger porches because people aren't really requiring like they're required to have an entry feature, but it's really not doing, I think, what a lot of us would like to see. But that, I think that's a really interesting thing to do. Maybe we could go back and see, kind of compare it to that, especially for people, you know, like yourself, who are familiar that process happened, and help tie it into that.
Thanks, Lauren.
Thanks, that's helpful.
So we're coming up against our 8 o'clock stop, but I want to see if anybody else has questions or comments on either neighborhood planning or the conservation overlay. Okay. Everybody's going to be bashful of either that or.
Bill?
Yes, Mike.
It wasn't on the agenda, but you sent out the decision on the 4201 to home.
Right.
Z-Pin today. Just wondering, I mean, the reasoning is a bit suspect on why they approved this. Is this a done deal, or is there any recourse that we can go back and say, you know, slow it down or get a better reason? I mean, it doesn't, I don't, do you know?
I don't know for sure. I'll turn it to Naomi in a second, see if she has any thoughts. And you know, you use the word suspect, and I think
So
as
here's
much
my
as
concern, Bill. Here's my concern.
no, Mike, let me go ahead and finish, because I think I understood your concern. The point I was going to make, because I've gotten a couple of questions and email on this, and I think it ties into what the point you're raising is, that the city feels as though it's not that they don't value neighbors' opinions, and they understand that neighbors are concerned with parking, but they believe there is a greater good that is citywide and needs to be shared throughout the city for you know, essentially getting cars off the street. I mean, that's a blunt way of putting it, and maybe there's a better way to put it, but that's there's an alternative point of view that tends to be citywide rather than neighborhood specific. So I know when I talked to Rebecca, she was very blunt and very specific that that even though we would raise an objection, that because of the overall strategy of the city, that we were likely to lose, and it was likely to be overridden. So I don't know, Naomi, if you can add anything more comprehensive or technical.
You put it really well, Bill, and I don't have much more good news. We've had situations too where, you know, there's written policy and they've made a determination based on it. And I can look into, I know there probably is a process for like appealing one of these decisions. I'm unfortunately not very optimistic about.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's how I would feel
Naomi,
too, that there's an appeal process, but this was a very small exception. And, you know, I think, at least from my perspective, and maybe as an RNO, that it's not about whether we won or lost, but that we made our stance heard. And I think that's the important part on these kinds of things, is for if we're taking a position based on the input from the community and the objections, we're really just a conduit to share that with them. I don't see a reason to appeal. I think that would just be a waste of time, to be honest. But, you know, I guess that's a question for the community if they feel so strongly.
Yeah, and I totally agree with what you said, Trupti. I don't, you know, going through the appeal. My concern is a little bit higher level is that, and you hit the nail on the head, Naomi, when you said, there's a bigger thing at here, or maybe Bill said it on, that this, and I guess, is it, what I'm concerned about is there really this belief that removing parking is going to reduce people using private vehicles? Because that to me is a very interesting concept, especially in the fact that governments are spending billions of dollars a few blocks away from here, expanding I-70 to promote more vehicles on the road.
Yeah, I think, and you bring up a really big debate, and it's a huge debate. There's a fair amount of research about induced demand and all, you seem to be kind of familiar with this, but I would say, for those two things, it's the city's policy versus sort of CDOT state policy.
Well,
I don't have an answer for you. I really don't.
I just want, so I understand. So, okay, I appreciate the feedback, and fairly new to these. I just joined the board, so sorry for the strange questions, but I'm still learning as we go through this. And I think that, reducing vehicles and getting less fossil fuel and being more environmentally conscious, these are all good things. I guess I just look at it and say, I don't know if reducing parking is a really great way to go about doing that. And that's a separate issue for a separate conversation.
Mike, remember that it wasn't just the reduction in parking. It was the fact that there was a car share.
That's right.
So part of how they were able to get awarded was the fact that they were putting a car share in. So they were taking up one spot for car share instead of 3 spots for parking.
I think that was a way for them to reduce from 50% exception to a 33% exception. So I think it's just a way for them to make it more palatable and easier to pass. But that's a great debate, Mike, and we could probably do many forums on just that.
Yeah, no. I don't want to go down that route. I just was wondering, because I'm new and learning all this stuff, and I think that these are good things. I don't disagree with the basis to do it. I just look at it and go, I just don't. I think there's got to be a better reason that the city could give than this to allow this parking. But it probably doesn't warrant any more time at this point.
Hey, we can think about inviting the city to help us understand. How's that?
Oh, that'll be fun for them.
Well,
thank you, guys.
We've gotten to 5 minutes after 8, so I know this is getting late for everybody, and I want to thank everybody for their participation, and we will see you next month.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Naomi. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Naomi.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, everyone.